The night was cold, and the rain fell endlessly, but nothing compared to the look of despair in his eyes when his mother slammed the door shut behind him. He stood there, holding nothing but a small bag and the weight of rejection heavy on his shoulders. I didn't think twice before telling him to come with me, to find warmth and safety in my home. At the time, I thought I was only giving him shelter. I never imagined that opening my door that night would also open my heart in ways I wasn't prepared for. This is a story about unexpected love born out of pain, about two souls finding refuge in each other when the world turned its back. And as the nights grew longer and the silence between us grew softer, I realized that what began as kindness would soon turn into something much deeper, something I couldn't control. Stay with me until the end, because what happened between us will leave you breathless, and you might just find yourself believing in love where you least expect it. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you won't miss the chapters of this unforgettable journey. The first time I saw him standing in the rain, clutching that worn-out backpack like it was the last piece of his world, I felt something shift inside me. His name was Caleb, and though I didn't know the full story yet, I could tell by the way his shoulders slumped and his eyes darted nervously toward the street that something inside him had broken that night. I had only gone outside to take out the trash, but when I saw him by the corner, drenched and shivering, I hesitated. He looked familiar. We had seen each other a few times around the neighborhood, exchanged casual greetings when life allowed. But that night was different. He wasn't just passing by. He was stranded, abandoned, and his silence screamed louder than any words could. "Caleb," I called gently, half expecting him to turn away. Instead, his eyes met mine, red-rimmed, brimming with tears he was clearly fighting to hold back. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he looked down, ashamed, almost apologetic for being seen like that. I stepped closer, my jacket barely shielding me from the storm. "What happened? Are you okay?" He shook his head once, then quickly looked away, like if he said the truth, the night would swallow him whole. But even without words, I could piece it together. I had heard rumors about how strict his mother was, how unforgiving she could be. That night confirmed everything. "She kicked you out?" I asked softly. His lips trembled as he gave a slight nod. My chest tightened. I didn't know the details, but I didn't need them. The pain on his face told me enough. "Come with me," I said without thinking twice. "You can't stay out here." For a moment, he just stared at me, uncertain, as if afraid my kindness was some sort of trick. But then the thunder cracked above us, and I saw his body flinch. Without another word, he followed me. When we stepped inside, the warmth of the heater wrapped around us, a sharp contrast to the icy rain outside. He stood awkwardly by the door, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. I grabbed a towel from the hallway closet and handed it to him. "Dry off. I'll get you some clothes." He took the towel, his fingers brushing mine, and I felt a jolt, not the kind you expect, but the kind that makes you suddenly aware of everything around you. The closeness, the silence, the weight of unspoken things. When he finally looked up at me, there was something vulnerable in his eyes, something that made me want to protect him at all costs. It wasn't pity. It was deeper than that, an instinct, a pull I couldn't explain. I handed him one of my old hoodies and a pair of sweatpants. They might be a little big, but at least they're dry. He managed the faintest smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes but still carries a spark of gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, barely audible, but it was the first thing he had said all night, and somehow it meant more than any long explanation. As he changed in the bathroom, I tried to steady myself. Why did I feel this urgency, this sudden connection? I had seen people in need before, helped friends through rough nights, but this was different. With Caleb, everything felt heightened, every look, every pause. When he came back, swimming in my oversized hoodie, he looked younger, almost like the weight of the night had shaved years off him. He sat on the couch, staring at the floor, his hands gripping the fabric of the sweatpants like he needed something to anchor him. I sat across from him, giving him space. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. His shoulders stiffened. He shook his head. "Not tonight." "Okay," I said, respecting the boundary. "But you're safe here." As long as you need to stay, you can. He looked up then, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, relief, but also confusion, like he couldn't understand why I was being kind to him when the one person who should have protected him had turned him away. The silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable but heavy with all the things neither of us dared to say. I wanted to tell him that I admired his strength, that I saw him, really saw him. But I stayed quiet, letting him breathe, letting him feel safe. As the clock ticked past midnight, I offered him the guest room. You'll get some rest there. Clean sheets, warm blanket. You need it. He hesitated before nodding. Thank you again. His voice cracked on the last word, and I realized how long he had been holding himself together. When he disappeared into the room, I sat alone in the living room, the sound of the rain still tapping against the windows. My chest felt tight, restless. I kept replaying the look in his eyes, the quiet plea for safety, the gratitude mixed with disbelief. And somewhere inside me, a thought I wasn't ready to face whispered louder and louder. Maybe I wasn't just helping him. Maybe I was already falling. That night changed everything. And as I lay in bed, wide awake, I couldn't shake the image of him in the next room, vulnerable and alone, and how much I already wanted to protect him from the world. But what I didn't know was that the days to come would test me in ways I couldn't imagine, and that offering him shelter would open the door to something neither of us had expected. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside washed and quiet. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that last night had been a dream, but then I saw the closed door down the hall, and the reality settled in. Kayla was here. I brewed some coffee, the rich smell filling the kitchen, and scrambled a few eggs. It felt strange, preparing breakfast for someone else, especially for someone who wasn't just a guest but someone who had stumbled into my life at its most fragile point. When Caleb finally came out, he looked hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be here. My hoodie hung loosely off his frame, and his hair was messy from sleep. He glanced at me, then at the table, almost embarrassed. I didn't mean to stay too long, he said quietly. You didn't, I replied quickly. Sit down. Eat something. You need it. He hesitated, then slid into the chair across from me. His eyes lingered on the steaming plate for a moment before he picked up the fork. I watched him take that first cautious bite, like he wasn't used to being taken care of. For a while, we ate in silence. But silence with Caleb wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken thoughts, like we were both dancing around questions neither of us dared to ask. Finally, he set the fork down and looked up at me. Why are you doing this? He asked softly. I froze. Doing what? Helping me. Letting me stay here. You don't even know me that well. I held his gaze, searching for the right words. Because I know enough, I said finally. I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong anywhere. And I know no one deserves to go through that alone. He blinked, caught off guard, and I saw the walls he had built around himself begin to crack. She didn't even hesitate, he whispered, his voice breaking. She just told me to leave. Like I wasn't her son anymore. My heart clenched. I wanted to reach across the table, to take his hand, but I stayed where I was, afraid of pushing too far. I'm sorry, I said quietly. You didn't deserve that. He swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Maybe I did. Maybe she was right. No, I said firmly, surprising both of us with the strength in my voice. Don't ever think that. Whatever her reasons, they don't define your worth. You matter, Caleb. More than you realize. The words hung between us, heavier than I intended. His eyes flicked to mine, wide and vulnerable, and for a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just that space between us. I looked away, breaking the tension, and stood to clear the dishes. The day passed slowly. Caleb stayed quiet, keeping mostly to the guest room, while I worked from home, though my focus was fractured. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the soft closing of a door, pulled my attention back to him. By evening, I decided to break the ice. Want to go for a walk? I asked, standing by his door. He looked up from the bed where he'd been sitting, his backpack by his side like he was ready to leave at any moment. After a pause, he nodded. The air outside was cool, crisp after the storm. We walked in silence for a while, the sound of our footsteps crunching on the damp pavement. Eventually, Caleb spoke. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," he admitted. "I don't have anywhere else to go. No money. No plan." "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," I said gently. "One step at a time. You've got a place here at least for now. We'll figure it out together." He stopped walking and looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Together?" I nodded. "Yeah. If you'll let me." The way he looked at me then, cautious but searching, like he wanted to believe it, made my chest tighten. It wasn't just gratitude I saw in his eyes. It was something more, something he wasn't ready to name yet, and neither was I. We returned home, and as the night deepened, I could sense his unease. He lingered in the living room, his hands fidgeting with the hem of the hoodie. "You can take the bed if you want," I offered. "I'll sleep on the couch." He shook his head quickly. "No. I can't take your bed." "It's not a big deal," I insisted. But he stood firm, almost panicked. "Please. I'll stay where I am." I didn't push. Instead, I nodded and let it be. But as I lay on the couch later, staring at the ceiling, I heard the faintest sound from the guest room, muffled sobs, quickly stifled. I wanted to go to him, to tell him he wasn't alone, to hold him until the world made sense again. But I stayed where I was, torn between the fear of crossing a line and the ache of wanting to be closer. And in that quiet, broken night, one truth became clear. I wasn't just offering Caleb shelter. I was offering him a piece of myself. And whether I was ready or not, he had already taken it. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. Because if I let this grow, if I let him in, nothing about my life would ever be the same again. And maybe that was exactly what I wanted. The next few days slipped into a rhythm neither of us expected. Caleb stayed quiet most of the time, moving carefully around the house like he was afraid of disturbing anything. But slowly, he began to settle into the space, leaving his shoes by the door, making coffee in the mornings when I overslept, even folding the blanket on the couch where I insisted on sleeping instead of taking back my bed. I noticed the small details. The way his laughter, rare but genuine, lit up the whole room. The way his eyes lingered on the window during rain, like he was searching for something far away. And the way my heart responded every time he spoke my name. On the fourth evening, I found him sitting on the back porch, staring out at the fading sky. The colors of sunset painted his face in soft light, and I couldn't ignore the quiet beauty of that moment. I stepped outside and leaned against the railing. "You've been thinking a lot," I said gently. He gave a small, tired smile. "That obvious?" "Only to someone paying attention," I replied. His eyes flicked to mine, holding the weight of something unspoken. "I just keep wondering why it had to be me. Why she couldn't accept me. Why I wasn't enough." The words hit hard. I took a deep breath, sitting down beside him. "You are enough, Cale. You always were. Sometimes, people's fear blinds them. It's not about you, it's about what they can't handle." His throat worked as he swallowed, fighting emotion. "But it still feels like my fault." I wanted to tell him everything, how much it hurt to see him blame himself, how much I wished I could erase that pain. Instead, I reached out and let my hand rest briefly on his shoulder. He didn't pull away. We sat in silence for a while, the air heavy with things unsaid. Then, suddenly he spoke again, his voice barely audible. "Do you ever feel like you want something you're not supposed to want?" The question caught me off guard. My heart stuttered, every nerve alert. "All the time," I admitted carefully. He turned his head, searching my face for meaning. "And what do you do about it?" I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my voice. I try to be honest with myself. Even if I can't say it out loud, I admit it's there. Pretending doesn't make it go away. His gaze lingered on me for a moment too long, and my chest tightened with the weight of possibility. But just as quickly, he looked away, his defenses snapping back in place. That night, I lay awake on the couch, my mind replaying that conversation. His question, his eyes, the hesitation in his voice, it all left me restless, caught between the thrill of hope and the fear of misunderstanding. The following afternoon, an unexpected tension filled the air. Caleb had gone for a short walk while I ran errands. When I returned, I found him sitting on the porch steps, his face pale, his fists clenched tightly. "What happened?" I asked, rushing toward him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with unease. "I saw her. My mom. She was driving past. She slowed down when she saw me here. And then," he trailed off, his voice breaking. "And then what?" I pressed, my heart pounding. She shook her head. Like she was ashamed. "And then she drove away." The pain in his voice cut through me. I sat beside him, resisting the urge to pull him into my arms. "Caleb, listen to me. Her reaction doesn't change who you are. It doesn't erase your worth. You're not something to be ashamed of." He buried his face in his hands. "Then why does it feel like I am?" The helplessness in his tone shattered something inside me. Without thinking, I placed a hand on his back, firm and steady. Because love is supposed to be unconditional. And when it isn't, it leaves scars. But you don't have to carry those alone anymore. He leaned into the touch, just slightly, like he needed it more than he could admit. For the first time, I felt the fragile line between comfort and something deeper blur, and I didn't want to pull away. Later that night, we sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting soft shadows. Caleb was quiet, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I don't know how to thank you," he said finally, "for all of this." "You don't have to," I replied. "But I want to," he said, his voice firmer. Then, almost hesitantly, "No one's ever looked at me the way you do." The air shifted. My pulse raced. "How do I look at you?" He hesitated, his lips parting like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. Finally he whispered, "Like I matter. Like I'm more than just a mistake." The confession stole my breath. I wanted to respond, to tell him exactly how much he mattered to me, but the weight of the moment pressed down too heavily. Instead, I reached over and squeezed his hand, letting the silence carry the words I wasn't ready to speak. His fingers tightened around mine, and in that touch, I felt something undeniable, a connection that neither of us could ignore anymore. But just as quickly, Caleb pulled his hand back, his face conflicted. "I should go to bed," he said, standing up abruptly. And just like that, he disappeared down the hall, leaving me with a storm of emotions I couldn't contain. As I sat there, staring at the empty space where he had been, one thought echoed louder than the rest. Something between us had shifted tonight. And whatever it was, there was no going back. The next morning, the air between us felt heavier, charged with everything unsaid from the night before. Caleb avoided my eyes as we moved around the kitchen, the clink of coffee cups louder than usual. I wanted to break the silence, to ask him about what he had confessed, about how I looked at him, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I asked about breakfast. "You want eggs or pancakes?" "Pancakes," he muttered, keeping his gaze fixed on the counter. His tone was calm, but the distance in it cut deeper than if he'd shouted. As I stirred the batter, I caught him sneaking glances at me, quick and fleeting, as though he couldn't help himself. Every stolen glance was a confirmation of the storm brewing beneath the surface. He wanted to say something, maybe as badly as I did, but neither of us knew how to cross that invisible line. The day dragged on, filled with silence and half-finished conversations. By evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Caleb, we need to talk," I said, blocking his path as he tried to retreat to the porch. His jaw tensed. "About what?" "You know what?" His shoulders stiffened, and for a moment I thought he might explode. But instead, his voice came out low, almost fragile. "I don't want to mess this up. You've been the only good thing in my life lately, and if I say the wrong thing, I'm afraid I'll lose it." The honesty in his words cracked something open inside me. "You won't lose me," I said firmly. "Not for telling me the truth." He stared at me for a long moment before finally shaking his head, as though he couldn't bring himself to believe it. He turned and walked away, leaving me with nothing but questions. 2 days later, the conflict I'd been waiting for arrived in a way neither of us could have predicted. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I'd convinced Caleb to join me at the grocery store. We needed food, and I thought getting him out of the house might lift his spirits. We wandered the aisles together, him pushing the cart while I grabbed items. It almost felt normal, like we were just two roommates figuring out dinner. But as we reached the checkout line, everything changed. "Caleb," a voice called sharply. We both froze. I turned to see a man in his 40s standing a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. His resemblance to Caleb was unmistakable, same sharp jawline, same stormy eyes. Caleb's entire body went rigid. "Dad," he whispered, his voice strangled. The tension was immediate, suffocating. His father stepped closer, his glare burning into Caleb. "So this is where you've been hiding? Living off strangers instead of facing your family?" I stepped in instinctively. "He's not hiding. He's safe here." His father's eyes snapped to me, filled with disdain. "And who are you?" "The reason he turned out this way?" My chest tightened with anger. "The reason he's standing here alive is because someone cared when you didn't." The words slipped out before I could stop them, but I didn't regret them. Caleb's father clenched his fists, his face red with fury. For a moment I thought he might hit me. Instead, he spat on the ground near our feet. "You're no son of mine," he snarled at Caleb. "And if you stay with him, don't bother coming back." With that, he stormed out of the store, leaving behind a silence so thick it rang in my ears. Caleb stood frozen, his hands gripping the shopping cart like it was the only thing holding him upright. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. "Hey," I said softly, touching his arm. "Look at me." He did, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. "Why does everyone I love leave me?" "You still have me," I said firmly. He shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "But for how long? Until you realize I'm too broken to fix." Without thinking, I pulled him into my arms right there in the middle of the store. People stared, but I didn't care. All I cared about was the boy clinging to me like I was his last anchor in a world that kept throwing him away. Back at the house, Caleb barely spoke. He went straight to the porch, sitting with his knees pulled to his chest. I joined him, sitting close enough that our shoulders brushed. "You don't have to go through this alone," I said quietly. He glanced at me, his eyes wet. "But what if you get tired of me too?" The vulnerability in his voice broke me. "Caleb, listen. I don't see you as a burden. I see you as someone worth fighting for." He stared at me, stunned by the conviction in my tone. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then slowly his hand found mine. His fingers trembled, but they didn't pull away. That night, long after he went to bed, I sat awake, replaying everything that had happened. The confrontation with his father, the way Caleb looked at me, the way his hand felt in mine. It all collided in a whirlwind of fear and longing. For the first time, I realized something terrifying and undeniable. I wasn't just protecting him anymore. I was falling for him. And if he felt even a fraction of what I did, then the next step would change everything. The days after the confrontation with Caleb's father felt like walking through a storm. There was silence in the house, not the comfortable kind we used to share, but a silence loaded with fear, unspoken questions, and emotions we were both afraid to name. At night, I'd hear him pacing the hallway. Sometimes he'd stop by my door as if he wanted to knock, but then I'd hear his footsteps retreat. It was torture, knowing he was struggling just feet away from me, and not knowing how to reach him. One evening, I finally decided I couldn't let the distance grow. I found him sitting on the porch again, staring at the stars like he was waiting for them to answer questions Earth never could. His arms were wrapped tightly around himself, and his shoulders shook as though he were carrying the weight of the world. I sat beside him quietly, letting the night wrap around us. "Caleb," I said softly, "I need you to know something." He didn't look at me. "What?" "That day at the store, when your father said all those things, none of it changes how I see you. You're not broken. You're not less. You're more than enough." His throat bobbed as he swallowed, and his voice cracked when he spoke. "But why? Why do you keep choosing me when everyone else has given up?" I turned toward him fully, my heart pounding. "Because you matter to me. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just someone I was helping. You became the person I look forward to seeing every day. The one I can't stop thinking about." That made him turn his head, his eyes searching mine desperately, like he wanted to believe me but didn't dare. "You mean that?" I do, I whispered. More than anything. For a long moment he just stared at me, the vulnerability in his gaze breaking through every wall between us. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I leaned closer. He didn't move away. Our foreheads touched first, tentative, fragile, like testing the waters of something sacred. When his lips finally brushed mine, it was gentle and hesitant, but it carried all the weight of everything we'd left unsaid. The kiss deepened slowly, trembling with fear and hope all at once. It wasn't perfect. It was raw, clumsy, almost desperate, but it was real. When we pulled apart, his face was wet with tears. I've never felt safe with anyone before, he admitted in a trembling voice. But with you, I do. I cupped his face, wiping the tears with my thumb. That's all I ever want, for you to feel safe. And maybe, to feel loved. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrifying, but I didn't take it back. His chest rose and fell unevenly. Loved, he repeated softly, like he was trying it out for the first time. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. I think I'm starting to understand what that means, because of you. The moment lingered, suspended in the quiet of the night. There were no fireworks, no grand gestures. Just two people sitting on a porch, holding on to each other like they'd finally found a place they belonged. In the days that followed, things didn't magically become easy. Caleb still carried scars, wounds that didn't disappear with a single kiss or confession. He still had nights when he woke from nightmares, gasping for air. He still questioned whether he deserved happiness. But now, he let me be there with him. He let me hold him when the shadows closed in. He let me remind him, over and over, that he wasn't alone. And in return, he gave me something I hadn't realized I was searching for, the chance to love someone wholly, without conditions. Looking back, I realized that taking him in that night, the night his mother shut the door on him, had changed both of us. What started as an act of kindness became a lifeline neither of us expected. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with certainty. Sometimes it comes quietly, in broken moments, in long silences, in the act of staying when others walk away. As I sit here now, watching Caleb laugh at something on TV, his eyes finally lighter, I know that what we've built is fragile, imperfect, but real. And maybe that's what makes it worth everything. Because love isn't about fixing someone. It's about seeing them as they are, scars and all, and choosing them anyway. And in choosing him, I discovered that I was choosing myself too, the part of me brave enough to love without fear, even when the world tried to tell us we didn't deserve it. So I'll keep choosing him. Again and again. And maybe, just maybe, that's what true love really is.